Dear friend of antiquity, let me introduce the second Schulz in our portfolio. It is Karl Schulz. Karl Schulz is the brother of Rudi Schulz, whose wine you will also find on our website. And he is the long-term winemaker at Hartenberg Wine Estate. Hi, Karl.
Hi, how's it going?
Cool, thanks.
Good, good.
Can you tell us something about that view we have from here? And what is happening down there maybe right away?
Sure. It's well, this time of the year, we're in October. This time of the year the vineyards have started to bud. There's lots of things that need to be done in the vineyard. The women behind us are busy raising foliage wires to hold the vine shoots in place. This time of the year, and you'll feel now, there's a slight breeze up here. The wind can get quite strong, and unless we protect the vines and hold the shoots in place, then they obviously get blown off. So it's important to look after them.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can, to start off with, tell us some general things about Hartenberg Wine Estate. How long is it on the map? What is it that you produce? And so on and so on.
It was Hartenberg is like many other Cape Dutch farms, was first farmed in the 1690s, a very long time ago. It was then grain, mostly cereal and grain, and some stock. But only in the late 1960s did it start to produce red wines that have become famous in South Africa. Hartenberg was the second producer of Shiraz in South Africa. We have wines going back to 1968. So it's the flagship wine of the estate, and it's been doing it for a long time. What's interesting is the name. Many of the names in the Cape are also Dutch. Hartenberg basically means heart as in heart, and it essentially translated means heart of the mountain. And up to the back of us there's a mountain, and Hartenberg is right in the arms of the mountain, and that's how the name came about. That's how the Dutch named the property. So we're at the top end of the estate at the moment. We're 280 meters above sea level, and then the farm drops all the way down to the lake in the distance, down to just over 100 meters above sea level. And you'll feel there's a breeze blowing at the moment. This is called the Cape Doctor. It's very important in the growing season that this wind blows every day, because it behaves a bit like a radiator in a vehicle. It has a very good cooling effect. As soon as the wind doesn't blow, then you can feel it's quite warm. And not just does it keep the vineyards cool, but it also helps to reduce the amount of sprays we need to do, because the fungal diseases, of course, that we find in any wine growing region is dependent on temperature and also on moisture and on air movement. The more air movement, the less disease pressure on the vineyards.
Okay, you say when you talk about spraying, we've been talking before, and I asked you about organic farming. And as far as I've understood, you try to stay as close to nature as you can, as possible. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Sure. Well, when we started off the property with the Mackenzie family, who own the business today, their philosophy was that we're going to the piece of land we received, we're going to improve, so that one day, when we're no longer there, we can say that we've improved what we received. So that's the founding philosophy. But it's interesting, the estate has one of the biggest privately owned wetlands in the Western Cape. It's a nature reserve. It's part of a 1,500 hectare conservancy area called the Bottleray Conservancy, which are these hills up at the back of us. The wetland has many different species of wild animals. There's 3 species of buck. There's lynx, there's porcupine, obviously lots of snakes and things, and there are over 80 species of bird. So in the wetland we have, as an attempt to encourage people to also look at the ecotourism side of agriculture, we have 2 hiking trails through the wetland. They're a few kilometers in distance, and they're very good. Along the route we have picnic spots. The estate does very good picnic spots which you can pack in a special rucksack at the tasting room, and we often find people, you take a picnic blanket and a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, and we often find people reading or sleeping at the picnic spots or whatever. So it's a place where people can enjoy part of the original nature, what it looked like originally, and just interact with the farm and what happens on the farm.
Okay. So what you say, there's basically no spraying. You're not like certified organic, but there is no chemicals in the vineyard.
We don't spray any synthetic products on the vineyards, not for weed killing or for fungal sprays. In the case of fungal sprays, traditionally in South Africa you have to spray preventatively. So you used to spray in a fixed program every 3 weeks, and you didn't miss a program. But we were very fortunate in 1999. I heard about a very good system, a weather forecasting system, which could produce locally generated weather data. And so today we have a situation where we have 3 weather stations on the property, which we'll look at later. And every 15 minutes they download 9 different parameters: wind speed, leaf humidity, soil humidity, air temperature, anything you could think of. And it combines it with some of the best weather forecasting capability in the world is the Dutch weather forecasting system. They obviously have a big cut flower industry, and it's a big part of their income. Mm-hmm. And the computer model which we have purchased combines that information, the long-term 7-day forecast for our general area, the southern part of Africa, along with the locally generated information. The model then converts it to real-time information, and it's literally in a position today where our viticulturist gets an SMS whether he needs to spray or not, and what the danger is of fungal disease. And one of the practical advantages has been that we've been able to skip sprays. So we're spraying almost 45% less than we ever sprayed previously, according to the conventional method.
Okay.
So it means that not just are you spraying less chemical, and then there's big cost saving, but more importantly, I think long term, from the soil's point of view and from the vineyard's point of view, it's just better for vine health and for soil health to be spraying less of anything.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that information. We've just seen all these ladies down here in the vineyard. They're down that way now. They are part of quite a crew working on this farm. How many members of staff have you got here?
We have 80 total members of staff. It's probably quite a bit more. Generally, the rule in the Western Cape is you have one person looking after 4 hectares of vineyard. Mm-hmm. is the general rule. In our case, we're at one person looking after 6.5 hectares of vineyard. It means your efficiencies need to be really good, but it also means that even if you have to employ more staff on a permanent basis, that you don't bring temporary staff into your business for crucial parts of the year.
That's what you told me before. I mean, you've got more than 60 people in the vineyard, if I got that right.
That's right, yes.
And you hire, they work for you all year round, so you don't have any casual stuff coming in only for the harvest, which many other farms do.
That's right. Our philosophy is generally that it takes years to train and to teach somebody the philosophy of what you're trying to achieve, not just from an environmental philosophy, as in don't litter. If they're wild animals, they're wild, leave them alone. To the quality effects of what we're trying to do in the vineyard, trying to essentially grow better grapes, make better wine. It's very difficult to then impart a philosophy in a short period of harvest. For example, if you took in casuals just for harvest, how do you explain to them in a short period of time that the grapes need to be spotless, that we, and in our case, we clean up every single bunch of grapes. For example, the bunch is cut. If there's any bird damage or if there's any sun damage, that specific berry is removed, a bit like table grapes. Mm-hmm. And we are practicing what we call precision viticulture. Okay. The canes eventually are positioned exactly. Every single cane we do bunch counts, we do bunch weights. We can calculate the harvest long before we actually harvest. Many of the vineyards we're cropping down, we're dropping grapes to the ground. And to be able to do all these things, you need people that understand what you want to do and what your philosophy is.
Casual obviously can't
do that. No.
But what you're telling me is you know exactly what is coming into the cellar once you harvest. You know long before.
I know 3 months before the harvest exactly how the harvest could look. And in many cases, especially a variety like Shiraz, which is a which is always happy to bear a good crop. In many cases, especially for our top-end wines, we reduce the crop 30% if we have to. So it's all in our control, and we have certain targets in mind, and we feel perhaps that a vineyard like the Stork Shiraz, it's a single vineyard Shiraz, we don't want to crop anything more than, say, 5 tons a hectare. And we can calculate how to get there. And if it means dropping, it's literally, the staff will get told, you drop 5 bunches or 8 bunches per vine to the ground. We do that quite early at veraison. As the grapes color, we drop crop. And it won't be unusual to see a curtain of grapes on the ground, if that's what it means to get quality.
Okay, that's what we call ausgeizen in our language.
Okay.
Thanks for all that information. I've introduced you as a long-term winemaker in this place. Please tell our audience, for how long have you been here? And why for such a long time?
Sure. Well, prior to joining Hartenberg, I was fortunate to have worked at Simmonsig Estate, which is a very well-known family-owned business. And they're famous because they produce a big range of wines. Mm-hmm. And so I had a very good foundation, as it were, and then heard about the opportunity at Hartenberg. Hartenberg is one of those farms up with Kanonkop, with Vergelegen, and with Thelema that a young winemaker would love to work at. It's one of the dream properties.
Okay, this is where you want to be.
Exactly.
And when did you get that opportunity? How many years ago, you said?
In 19, yeah.
Oh my God.
1993.
Okay, so that's really a very long time.
It is.
But obviously the owners are doing something right to keep you here for so long and to keep you happy.
Exactly. It's a combination of factors. We have some of the best ownership in the business, in the sense that they take virtually nothing from the business. Everything is reinvested in the business. It means we have enough money to replant vineyards. We have enough money to buy barrels. If you could imagine the theoretical ideal of doing everything perfectly,
it's a very long-term passionate investment.
Long-term philosophy. There's no shareholders need to be paid any sort of dividend. These people, it's about building a legacy, building a reputation, and I don't think it's the driving force isn't money. This is a lot more than just money, and they're not really interested in just pure money. Okay. To them, it's a matter of pride. They're trying to build something beyond generation. And they have a very long-term view about how to build a quality wine business.
Okay, and we can feel it in the quality of your wines. Thank you so much, Carl.
Thank you.
So, Carl, we are now at a lower place of the farm, you said, and it's a special historic place we are here.
That's right. Behind us is what we call the manor house, the main house, and it's actually the family homestead of the Bosman family in South Africa. They originated from this farm, and what was interesting is many hundreds of years ago, the journey between Cape Town and Stellenbosch was by wagon, ox wagon, and by horseback. And what people don't realize is there are about 8 different rivers between Stellenbosch and Cape Town. And today we cross them without blinking an eye on the freeway. But it was a real challenge, especially in the winter, for them to cross many of the rivers. So the journey took all of 2 days to do, and you'd have to rest somewhere along the way. And the farm was famous as a coach stop. Stagecoach stop would happen at the farm. And behind us we have 2 rows of oak trees. They're all over 200 years old. And the road from Cape Town, you basically came up the estate, and then up and beyond through to Stellenbosch over the hill. And this is one of the stops. And the trees were planted to provide shade for the horses, and for people who didn't have accommodation, they'd sleep in the wagons too. They'd sleep outside under the trees.
Okay, so this place is really breathing history.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, on many of the old windows, which are hand-cast lead glass windows, some of the people have carved out their names on the glass. So you've got names dating back to 1840 and 1820, and interesting times. Obviously the wagons happened before then, but there are many small things on the estate that reflect the history of the Cape. There's some of the buildings that were built in the time of the British occupation, 1820. There's a small cottage that was built by the British. At one stage, the farm was one of the main sites for horses that were used in the Anglo-Boer War, and they're troughs that were built by the British soldiers, horse troughs for drinking water. And this would be an assembly point. They'd bring horses, acclimatise them on the estate, and then put them on train to send up to the old Free State and the Transvaal in the fight against the Boers. So there's some interesting history.
So lucky us that there was always people keeping this place up as it is and keeping the historic sites.
Absolutely. I think it's the big advantage of Stellenbosch too, is that many of the older buildings in the historical part of town have been restored and saved, and I think that's an advantage here too, is that we have one or two very nice old buildings still, which, as you mentioned, people had the wisdom to preserve.
Absolutely. What was the reason in the ancient days for people to travel from Cape Town to Stellenbosch? What was Stellenbosch in those days?
Stellenbosch was the food basket of the Cape at that stage. A lot of the Freeburgers' farms were along the Eerste River. A famous farm like Vergelegen belonged to the governor of the time. Van der Stel owned Vergelegen and one or two other farms. And very fertile soils, lots of water, and it literally provided the food basket.
Oh, okay, so they provided the food for the city. So there was heavy traffic.
Well, relatively, yes, which took 2 days
Obviously not compared to now.
Yeah, exactly. What was interesting is on many of the mountain peaks around Stellenbosch and the area that we're standing, there are still cannon. So a very famous South African property, Kanonkop, is Cannon Hill, and there's a cannon up in the top of the mountains behind us. And the way it used to work is the ship would arrive in the dock, and a series of Morse code through cannon shots would ring out, and the cannons would be fired from the Cape all along. And once the cannons cannon shots reached Somerset West, they would reverberate all the way through to Tilburg. And you'd have the message getting across that pick whatever you've got on the fields and start going to Cape Town, because there's a new client arriving. He's arrived. It's going to take him 2 days to get the product, but they would bring milk. They'd bring milk and honey and vegetable products and fruit products through to Cape Town Harbour. And that's how they got the message, through cannons. And
that's all we need today.
Exactly.
Stupid mobile phones. Unbelievable. So thanks so much, Carl, for showing us that really marvelous place here. I think you promoted the farm as good as you could, and I hope that many of our viewers will sooner or later in their lives have the opportunity to pass by and have a glass of your beautiful wine.
It'll be an absolute pleasure, and I do hope they visit, because, as you say, it is quite beautiful and well worth a visit.
It's not only the wine. Thank you so much, Carl.
Thank you.
So this is now the biggest privately owned barrel cellar in South Africa, you're telling me?
That's correct, yes. It's built 3 to 5 meters below ground. We store in total about 800 barrels, different wines, Chardonnay and pretty much all the reds.
Okay.
Half the barrels are entry-level wine called Cabernet Shiraz.
Which is a very popular wine, you've been telling me.
Yeah, it's extremely popular. It's at a very good price point. In South Africa, it's considered one of the best, if not the best, value for money red. Last month in the wine magazine, it was rated 4.5 stars. Came second in the tasting. It beat lots of well-known expensive wines.
4.5 stars
out of 5.
I know, yeah. For a wine selling for less than 10 euros, even in Germany.
Oh yeah.
So that is very, very good value for money.
It's 50 rand off the farm. So, very little money.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, when was the cellar built?
It was built in 1990.
Okay. And
it was really just to provide a new home for the barrels. And then the other half of the cellar contains a whole lot of bottled wine, and which we store in readiness for release to the market. The environment is controlled. It's 15 degrees Celsius, the temperature.
Okay.
Obviously, if you're below ground, the temperature is a lot more stable, which works really well. And the humidity is around about 80%, which doesn't feel like it, but because of the low temperature. And if you increase the humidity, you reduce the evaporation of wine from the barrels. So we're topping up the barrels once a month.
Okay.
Small amounts, so yeah.
Oh my God. But tell me your serious opinion on how important it is for your wines, once bottled, to be stored in a stable temperature, or doesn't that really matter? Because I mean, the wine is traveling overseas in containers. It's in private households. Temperatures go up down to, I don't know, 12 degrees at night, 30 degrees during the day. And people are very special about it sometimes, and others couldn't care less. What is your opinion on it?
I think it's scientific fact that the longer period that wine is exposed to fluctuating temperature, the worse it is for the wine. If we accept that there is even bottled, oh yes, we accept the reality that once the wine leaves the cellar, that it's going to go through different temperature challenges. But I think our feeling is that if we could, on our side, we have the wine for the majority of its life, prior to the fact that it gets to a private collector who would then mature it, we'd like to see that the temperature is stable and on the lower side. I think it's quite clear that if you store the same wine at different temperatures, it influences the rate of development. There's no doubt about it.
Does it speed up the development, or does it have bad influence on the taste right away?
Well,
if you heat a wine up to 40 degrees in a container, will it taste worse 2 weeks later, or won't you be able to pick up a difference?
Definitely tastes worse. If you had the same wine at 20 degrees and you had some samples of that wine at 40, you'll taste the difference. Definitely.
Okay, so we shouldn't ship in summer. That's what you're saying.
You should preferably not ship in summer, or if you do ship in summer, you must ship in reefers, air-conditioned containers, or you must ship in foil bags, which is also possible. So you line your inside of your container with aluminium foil. You load inside the envelope, and you close it afterwards. That's definitely the way to go. I certainly wouldn't recommend shipping out of South Africa December, January. You want to be shipping October, preferably. If you do ship in December, January, the problem is often not in the container on the ship. It's sometimes waiting to be loaded. That's the problem. It depends how you arrange for it to be stored, but if it spends just 1 or 2 days outside waiting to be loaded in December or January, then that's a big challenge for the wine.
So that's bad news. Thanks very much for telling me. So now let's carry on with what happens in the cellar. You said once bottled, the wine moves from here to somewhere else. Can you please show us?
Sure. Let's go and have a look. So once the wine has completed its time in barrel, we would think of bottling. And it's important for us to know that once we finish bottling, prior to the wine leaving the cellar as a labeled finished product, that when we store it, in optimal conditions, because some of these wines will spend up to 2 years in bottle prior to release. Is
that to give it to the market only when it's ready for drinking, when the quality is up, or is it because you have a backlog in sales?
No, not at all. I mean, a producer can choose to sell when it sells a wine.
Usually, the wine on the market is much too young. It's a worldwide phenomenon because the producers need the cash flow.
Exactly. In South Africa, if you go to a restaurant, the red wines are on average 2 years old. If you ask those winemakers if they were given a choice, there's no doubt that they would choose to sell their wines older. But cash flow is a problem. The thing is, once you're in a 4-year sales cycle, once you're in the cycle, it doesn't cost money. Because for every new vintage you're bringing in,
yeah, sure, but
you're financing with the vintage you're selling.
The first 4 years are tough.
It's tough. It's tough. But then you need owners who understand wine,
Yeah.
and who drink wine and who love wine,
And who can afford it?
and who can afford it.
Yeah.
And this is exactly. I mean, if you have the funds to build a facility like this,
Okay.
you must be able to afford it. So
True.
it's a question of philosophy.
So this is now Shiraz we're looking at.
Yes.
And that label comes off afterwards.
Yeah, it comes off. It's an identification tag which is required by law in South Africa. If you're storing unlabeled stock, they need to identify the wine.
Okay, so you only label once you give it to the market.
That's right. Yes, we store unlabeled and we label up according to demand.
Okay, cool. So we move on.
Yep. What I wanted to do for probably 10 years is I want to develop a secondary price list called a Vinitec list,
Yes.
which will allow. I saw this program in Australia and in the US where at really good sellers. But for example, Chardonnay, you can buy back 10 vintages. Shiraz, you can buy 10, 15 vintages. Small quantities.
Yes.
There's a limitation. And so a few years ago, I managed to convince the owners that we start this program. And now you can buy, it's 3 or 4 vintages already. So for example, the 04 Merlot, which is a very well-known wine, the 05, which won the international trophy for Merlot. There's small quantities available because many of the restaurants, the fine dining restaurants, are looking for vintage wines, older wines.
Okay.
And then there's certain collectors that drink 8 or 10-year-old wines, then they're able to purchase the wine. And we mature the wine at optimal condition.
Okay.
So that's an advantage.
Your upmarket wines, when do you see them at the highest level they get to? After how many years? Can you say that? Is there like a rule to that?
The flagship wine is Gravel Hill. And the vintage that's drinking well at the moment is 2000, 2001. That's optimal for me.
Okay, so 10 years.
Yeah, at least.
Okay, which is a very long time for South African wines in general.
Yeah. It's
Because
considered.
if you listen to Charles Webb, for example, he sees his wine on the top after about 5 years, he says.
For me, 5 years for our Cabernet, our Merlot, and our Shiraz is a good place. 5 to 8 years. But the Stork and the Gravel Hill and the Mackenzie,
Yes.
8 to 10 years. Yeah. Gravel Hill, 10 years.
It's a pity we don't have Gravel Hill yet. We'll have to add that to our portfolio.
It was the first single vineyard wine in South Africa, and today it's one of the most famous wines in South Africa. It's produced in small quantities, but it's done really well in the last 15 years that we've made it.
Okay.
And it's a famous wine in South Africa.
So what you're telling me is so mouthwatering that today you can't let me go without giving me one old bottle that is really nice. Okay.
We'll give you a sample to look at. So
What a beautiful underground place is this here?
Mm-hmm.
You said we are 5 meters below surface.
Yes.
Okay, it's freezing cold in here for me, but it's beautiful. I like the place. What is it?
Well, that's why I'm wearing a jersey. It is cool. It's the private cellar of the owners, and as I mentioned earlier, the property is family owned. They love wine. They love collecting wine, drinking good wine. But I think what's really good about the whole setup is that we regularly open wines. We do tastings. We often get the whole cellar team right down to the guy who sweeps the floor. We get them around the table. We'll benchmark taste our Chardonnay against other top Chardonnays. There's Burgundy, there's California, Australia, New Zealand. And it gives you, and it's well researched. The owners often have really good notes. They know all about the wines. They know exactly what the history is. And it's used as a motivational, educational tool. So it's fantastic that you get to taste some of the wines. And it serves as a motivation. It brings a certain perspective to what you're doing and what.
Do you get people that are not usually working with the wine, but helping in the cellar? So do you get them interested in wine, really?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. We even
cool.
we bring in for us the more people in our business, whether they're admin staff or vineyard staff. Anybody that isn't directly related to the wine but is involved in the business, it's extremely important that they're informed and that they're knowledgeable, because in the end wine is all about a whole series of processes, and it doesn't start in the winery. It starts way before that. So it's important for us that everybody is on the same page, as it were.
So the interesting news for me, it's not only a business, it is really about the wine, and it's a passion.
It has to be. If you're not passionate about this business, you can't make good wine. This is a really special place. I've had many opportunities, but there's a combination here of being really inspirational, informed, passionate ownership. It's one of the most unique viticultural sites in the Western Cape. It has 8 different soil types. The altitude rises over 150 meters over the length of the property. The property
and that makes a difference. Those 150 meters really make a difference.
Yeah. In the Western Cape, for every 100 meters you rise, you have 1 degree Celsius change in temperature.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but it makes a big difference. We're also at altitude, and so we get prevailing winds, which the valley floor often doesn't get. And the estate is unique in the sense that it's an entire valley. So we have many different slopes. We have north, south, east, west-facing slopes. And slope aspect makes a big difference in wine, not just here, but all over the world.
The more you talk, the prouder I become to be your partner, really.
Yeah.